Now we're going to get to one of the biggies and the really important point here. The bottom of that page, we're talking about the California minimum wage going up. I want to spend a little bit of time on that. I strongly encourage you to ask questions because this is one you cannot mess up. The biggest source of litigation we have is pay practices. That not only includes how much you're paying, but also what's on your pay stub, if that complies with all the rules for that. We'll talk a little about that as well. But I've had situations where we fire somebody, the termination's clean, they might go to a plaintiff's lawyer, and the plaintiff's lawyer says, well, even I would have fired you, but let's look at the big gotcha and talk about all their pay practices and the paperwork for pay stubs. And that's where we get nailed. And the violations of cost for that can add up really quickly. It's interesting, there was a case came down about 2 weeks ago where an employer had somebody who filed a claim for back pay of $300 on a final paycheck. $300 was alleged to be owed. And the employer fighting it and appealing it and going on with attorney's fees, penalties, interest, waiting time, all these things, especially the fees really got over $90,000 before they were done. No, pay the $300. The big thing is, if they just understood how to cut a final paycheck in the first place, never would have happened. None of it. So when I mention that these things can mushroom, I really do not ever want to see anyone in San Luis Obispo having a $300 problem turn into a $90,000 problem. I care. Please don't let this happen to you. So let's talk about the minimum wage change. You've probably been familiar with the fact that minimum wage has been going up. It's ultimately going to go up to $15 an hour. It's phased in over time. After that, we're going to see it increase potentially each year based on a formula. It's an automatic thing. So you will never be free of checking the website, checking for the legal update prior to January 1 of every year, guys, to know what the new minimum wage will be for the upcoming year. You don't want to find out about this the first time today in January. But if you are, you're going to have some back pay to make sure you take care of if you're not already up to minimum wage with any of your folks. Now you can see in here, if you have 26 or more employees, you're going to be stepped up faster than the smaller employers. And so January 1, as of January 1 this year, if you have 26 or more employees, the minimum wage is $12 an hour. If you have 25 or fewer employees, your minimum wage now is $11 an hour. I mean, so far so good. A couple things to keep in mind. First, there's a ripple effect. For that employee who was $10 it was $10.50 an hour last year, and now has to be $11 an hour. Well, what about the employee who was $11 an hour last year? They were some percentage higher than the bottom rung. Well, now they're going to feel like they're back to the bottom rung. You might need to have some ripple effect until you start getting further and further away from that minimum rate, like the folks who are maybe at $20 an hour. They won't feel that squeeze. But down near that minimum wage level, you're going to have a compression going on where the folks who, as of December 31st, were above minimum wage are now at minimum wage. So there's a ripple effect there that expands your payroll if you want to make sure you retain the folks that you have. If you're asking more responsibility of somebody such that they've been getting more than minimum wage, you don't want to bump them back down to minimum wage and they go, why should I have all this extra responsibility? What do I care? So important to think about. But the biggest issue to keep in mind is for exempt employees. And again, this is a big topic we're covering in the upcoming seminar. People classify folks as exempt for all the wrong reasons. The presumption is everybody's an hourly employee unless you can carry the burden of proof to establish they are legitimately not subject to the hourly pay overtime break rules. So if they are legitimately capable of being exempt based on their duties, and we are doing a whole seminar on that, so I'm not going to cover that here. One of the elements for them to legitimately be exempt is that they are paid a minimum salary, a minimum monthly salary. And that salary minimum number has to be met even if they're part-time exempt. You have somebody who works 2 hours a day during the week, and that's all they do, but they are otherwise legitimately exempt. This is the minimum salary. Doesn't matter if they work 10 hours a week or 100 hours a week. And that minimum salary is calculated at twice your current minimum wage rate. So if you are under, 25 or fewer employees, the minimum salary for an exempt person at your company, it's on page 20 here, will be $45,760 a year. If you have 26 or more people, that number's $49,920 a year. And that's the number. Now, you've probably heard about minimum wage being higher in LA and certain other places, but the state minimum wage is what governs, even down in LA. So if you have an office down there, it's still the state numbers that will govern this. But what's going to happen is, as you can see on page 20, once we hit $15 an hour, the minimum salary for someone to be exempt will be a little over $62,000 a year. There's a number of companies, certainly around here that I know of, where they just simply cannot afford to pay that for an exempt salary. That's the minimum, guys. And a lot of those clients need to start, those companies need to start thinking about possibly changing some of these folks to hourly. Now, how you do that, what factors to consider, we'll be talking about in the seminar on the 29th, but it's something you need to be thinking about. How much can you afford to budget for salaries of your exempt people? And this is the minimum salary that you can have for someone who is otherwise already legitimately exempt. Now, I will mention the minimum wage in Los Angeles. I always like to just point out, if you'll see on page 21 here, who is an employee covered by the minimum wage in Los Angeles. And it's interesting that you will have an employee covered by that higher minimum wage if they spend at least 2 hours of work in a payroll work week in that geographic area. So if you have people who go down to meetings in LA every now and then, if they're spending 2 hours or more in LA, you're going to have to be paying minimum wage for that time that they spend down there at the LA minimum wage rate. So it's very important to understand. Now, if all they're doing is driving through LA, and we all know it can take more than 2 hours to drive through LA, even at 1 in the morning, right? Okay? But if they're not stopping for any work-related reason, just driving through the, horrible traffic there isn't enough for them to be working in LA. But if they stop for a meeting, if they're stopping to make a delivery, we all know that it's almost impossible to be driving through LA, making a delivery, dropping something off, and getting back out of the LA city limits in less than 2 hours. So keep that in mind if you have people going down to LA for any reason.